Good morning, everybody. Let's hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties today, and let's see how we get along. I'm going to start in about 2 minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess he's an Xbox and I'm more Atari. But the way you play your game ain't fair. I picture the fool that falls in love with you. Oh, she's a gold digger. Well, just don't you know. Ooh, I've got some news for you. Yeah, go on and run tell your little boy free. See you driving round town with the girl I love, and I'm like, forget you. I guess the change in my pocket wasn't enough. I'm like, forget you and forget her too. Said if I was richer, I'd still be richer. Oh wait, that's some shh. And although there's pain in my chest, I still wish you the best. If I forget you. Now I know that I had to borrow, beg and steal and lie, cheat. Trying to keep you, trying to please you. Just being in love with your ass ain't cheap. Now I picture the fool that falls in love with you. Oh, she's a gold digger. Well, just don't you know.
Right, let's get this party going. So yesterday we sort of started the real estate transfer disclosure statement. So we're going to finish where we started. So basically, like I said, there's a few parts to this that makes this a complete document. The first part is there has to be something in section 1. One of these 3 boxes needs to be checked. Most of the time, it is just going to be no substituted disclosures. Second is section 2. Seller is or is not on the property, and anything that is in the property, whether it's working or not, this is just stuff that is in the property. Then the question becomes, are you aware of anything that is not working? If you say yes, if the seller says yes, this is for the seller to fill out. If they say yes, then they have to describe what's not working. Microwave doesn't work, or, rain gutters, on the left side leak, whatever it is, they need to explanation there. Then it goes on to ask some specific questions about the property. And the thing is, and you can tell your seller when they're dealing with it, it's not a yes or no answer in terms of is something there. The question is the seller aware of it? So if the seller's not aware of it and they say no, even if it may be happening, it's not an issue because they're saying they're not aware of it. So let's say, room additions, structural modifications, or other alterations made without necessary permits. If they're not aware of anything, then it's no. If they know when they bought the house, they knew the extra bedroom wasn't permitted, then they would have to say yes. And then again, any yeses need an explanation. Now, section 3 also needs to be filled out. If you are a Century 21 agent and you are representing the buyer or the seller, you are required to do an AVID. If, other companies may not do an AVID, they may say, agent notes, click this, and then type in, nothing noted. I mean, we cannot require them to do an AVID. This is their AVID. If we ever go to a court of law, this would be an issue for them to prove that they actually did what they were supposed to do. But as Century 21, you need to do an AVID whether you represent the seller or the buyer, no matter what the case is. If it's a trust, if it's a bankruptcy, if it's a short sale, if it's a relocation, you still need to do your visual inspection. So that's what makes up a complete TDS. So if this part is not completed, or if you check, I'm going to do an avid, and you don't have an avid done, it is not completed until you have an avid. And then once you hand over the avid as the selling side listing agent, that creates a 5-day right of cancellation. So do your avids as quickly as possible. The best time to usually do them is when you are taking pictures. If you're on the listing side, if you're on the buyer side, the best time to do it is when you're doing your home inspection. This way it's done early in the process. We don't have to worry about it at the end, and then everyone signs. Questions about the TDS? Now, if you are the few cases that you are exempt from doing a TDS, which is a successor trustee selling the property that never lived on the property. This is where the trust owns the house, but the trustees passed away, and now the successor trustee is selling it. They never lived on the property. You can fill out an ESD. If you are a landlord and you have tenants, you are still required to do a TDS. This is not an exemption. If it's a bankruptcy court selling it, if it's the bank or relocation company selling it, they're exempt because they never lived on the property. But otherwise, there's very few exemptions. But if you are exempt, you fill out what's called an exempt seller disclosure, and they can ask a few simple questions. Last 3 years of death on the property. Was there property located into industrial zone? You're not going to know that. That's the NHD report. So it's basically 10 questions, 10, 11 questions that are very generic about the property. Once you answer them, if there's any yeses, again, you need to give an explanation. Everyone signs, and we move on. If you do an ESD, you may not have to do an SPQ. If you do a TDS, you definitely need to do an SPQ. So let's go to the agent visual inspection, which is part of the TDS. So again, information up here. You're Century 21 Everest who's doing it. And this is a visual inspection. We are not opening doors. We are not turning on, the gas range. We're not turning on the AC unit. We're not checking the water pressure. This is all visual. You are walking through the property. You are looking at the property. Smells are okay. If there's a pungent smell, you can put that down, but it's all visual. You're not going to, open up closets. You're not going to go underneath the sink and look to see if there's any leaks or anything like that. So again, it's all visual. Also, please make sure when you're doing this, don't use adjectives. Don't use large crack, small crack. Don't explain, where the stain on the wall came from. You're not an expert. A stain on the wall. You can't say stain on the wall due to a leak. We don't know that. So it's as generic as possible, no adjectives, no adverbs, no, there are 10 holes, there are 2 holes, there are 5 cracks. There are cracks, there are holes. Be as, generic as possible, because you may have seen 3, someone else may have seen 4, now we have a problem. If everyone just says there's cracks, yes, there are cracks. Big cracks, small cracks, subjective. And then you're going to go through every room. And if there is something in a room that there is nothing, if you can't find a stain on the wall or dirty carpet or anything like that to identify the room, just say nothing noted. But at least you need to make sure you go into every single room there. Okay, the SPQ is like the TDS. Again, it's a questionnaire. Again, it's filled out by the seller, and that is why, I can't check any of these boxes. I can fill in this stuff up here, but I can't do anything down here. And again, it's just yes or no questions, and it says, are you aware? Within the last 3 years, the death of an occupant on the property, are you aware? If you say no, and someone died, but you didn't own the property back then, you're not aware of it. So it's very, sellers are afraid, oh my God, if I get the answer wrong. There is no wrong answer. It's just, are you aware of it? Now with deaths on property, Legally, all we have to disclose is 3 years. If a buyer or an agent comes up to you and says, was there ever a death on the property? And you know there was a death on the property, you need to disclose that. So even if it was 10 years ago, you still need to disclose that, because some cultures, they will not buy a property that there was a death on the property. And also neighbors will talk. So if someone committed suicide 10 years ago in the property, technically you don't have to disclose it, but again, neighbors will talk. So is it better they find out from you or they find out from the neighbor? If they find out from the neighbor after they close escrow, yes, they didn't ask you, but again, it's a question and you're going to have upset clients. So be very specific. 3 years, yes or no. If they ask you, you have to disclose.
Brad, I can't see the screen. You're gone again. Does anybody else see you? I mean, I see that. I don't see any paperwork, the documents.
Does anyone else see?
Yeah, I can see it fine.
I see it. Okay, it must be me.
Yeah, it must be your gallery view, or do you just see all a bunch of us pictures?
I see you guys, but I see like introducing Zoom apps. So I don't know how that happened. And I have to go off.
Yeah, if you need to go back in and come in again, you could do that. Okay, so the SBQ again is just questions. Insurance claims affecting the property in the last 5 years. Are you aware of any? Yes or no. Now, this is also going to be validated by the insurance company. So when someone gets a new quote, they're going to run a report to show any issues in the last 5 years. And if they come back and say, wait a minute, you had a claim and you're not aware of it, that's a question. If you are, if you only lived there 3 years, you don't know what happened before, that's fine. Now, for people who've lived there less than 5 years, you should also have the information when you bought the property, what was conveyed to you, and then you can convey it to the new tenants. So there's always ways to find out the answers to these questions. Okay, disaster relief, water-related mold issues, pets. Now they've changed this a little bit. It used to just say, are there pets on the property? Now it's like, in the past or present, do you have pets on the property? So you may have had, and there is no time limit here. So you may have had a dog 10 years ago. You'd have to say, yes, there was a dog, and 10 years ago, and they're no longer with us. So these don't have a time limit. So this is just past or present pets, past or present livestock, wildlife, insects, or pests on the property. I'll tell you a story about this one. We had a deal where we had a horse property up in Sylmar. We sold it. A month later, we get a call from the other agent saying, you know what, we have an issue. There are flies all over this property. You never disclosed it. We're going to take you to court. They took us to court, and guess what? We lost because we didn't disclose there were flies on the property. So, you need to be aware of what's going on. Two things. Neighbors are always going to talk, and that's my standard. So if you think the neighbors are going to say something, you better say it first. And also, if you are aware of something, disclose it. Don't be afraid that, oh my God, if I disclose this, we're not going to be able to sell the property. Okay. Another big area is the neighborhood, nuisances. If someone has a party every Friday night, you know about it, you're aware of it, you need to disclose it. If you live near a school and when school's in session, you can't get out of your driveway, you need to disclose it. If you live, we have a street up, here, and everyone has, Christmas candy cane lane. So if you live on that street during Christmas, traffic is unbearable and you're not going to get out of it. If you see the property in August, you have no idea what's going on. You need to disclose it. Stuff that you need to disclose. It is better to disclose and lose a deal than close a deal and have to go to court afterwards. Because there will be someone who buys your property. Okay, lead-based paint, basically if the property is, prior to 1978, we have to disclose lead-based paint. And again, the question is, do you have any knowledge of lead-based paint? If you have no knowledge, then you don't. You know, if you have knowledge, do you have any reports or records pertaining to it? You know, and this is for older buildings where they may have painted over the lead-based paint. They may not have treated it correctly where, you have to tent and, have a hazmat team remove the lead-based paint because of the way it works, also with asbestos. But again, if you don't have knowledge and you're not aware, you don't need to disclose it. In the past, we used to have to give all these booklets about environmental hazards, earthquake safety, protect your family and all that. And these were tons of booklets, usually provided by title, for us to give to the clients. Now we have these nice little links that if they click on this link, it will take them to the report if they'd like to print it or not. So make sure when you have a listing, this is something you give to the buyer to make sure that you're in compliance with handing over all the reports that they're supposed to have. Notice to perform. This is, people think this is the worst thing in the world. Oh my God, I don't want to give a notice to perform. Oh my God, I got a notice to perform. A notice to perform is just, I'm doing my duty as an agent. I have a fiduciary duty to my seller or to my buyer to protect their interest. So, did they not remove a contingency? Okay, I need them to remove their loan contingency. Now everything's 17 days, so it makes it a little bit easier. But be specific of what you are asking them to do. If it's been 3 days and you've not got their earnest money deposit in, give them a notice to perform. Hey, we need your earnest money deposit in. Had a deal where it was 7 days, there was no earnest money deposit. The seller says, I want to cancel. Unfortunately, we can't cancel a contract unless we give a notice to perform or a demand to close. So what you need to do is say, okay, you know what? I'm giving you a notice to perform. You haven't put in your EMD money. It's supposed to be within 3 days. Now you have 2 days. You can't do less than 2 days, but you have 2 days from the point of that you gave this notice. And again, it can't, calendar days count, can't end on a weekend. So the day I write this and turn it over, next day is day 1. So they have until 11:59 of day 2 to comply. At that point, I can send them a cancellation. So you need a notice to perform or a demand to close before you can cancel. And they have everything here that could possibly, go that you need, delivery, escrow evidence, sale of buyer's property. Did we not get, verification of funds? Did we not get the updated lender information that we asked for? So be very specific of what you're asking for. Don't treat this as an enemy, treat it as a friend that's going to help you through the transaction and help you get to a close that everyone's happy and we have a successful close. Demand to close escrow. This is the big boy. This is like, hey, we're past our time. We need to be closing. What's going on? And this is either the seller can give it to the buyer or the buyer can give it to the seller. It works either way. So if the seller is giving it, it says, hey, I'm telling you right now, we have 3 days to close. If you can't close in 3 days, I can cancel. Doesn't mean you're going to cancel, it means I can cancel. I've had deals where we had a notice to perform, a demand to close, and we still close successfully. So this is not the end all be all, but it gives you the option. If your seller says, you know what, I'm tired, I want to cancel now, you have the option to cancel. If you don't do this, then you have to wait another 3 days before you can cancel. And then the buyer can do the same thing. The buyer can say, hey, I'm ready to go. What's your problem? Why can't we close? And again, it's 3 days. After 3 days, you can cancel if they can't perform. Seller can cancel, the buyer can't perform.
So do they get their earnest money deposit back?
That is always a question for discussion.
Okay.
We'll go about that when we, cancellation of escrow. But I never say 100% yes, they will get their money back. I always say their escrow, the EMD is always in jeopardy because we never know what's going to happen. And I'll explain that when we go over the cancellation. Okay, so that's what we should have covered yesterday. So we got everything caught up in 18 minutes. So now we can go on to the next one. Day 3, this is what we're supposed to be talking about. So these are auxiliary documents that are part of the transaction. So let's say I need more time for my inspections, or I need more time to get my appraisal done, or I need more time to get my loan approved. So there's no verbal real estate. I've had too many deals where one agent calls the other agent and says, hey, you know what? I need a few more days. Is that okay? The other agent says, yeah, fine, no problem. We need to document everything. Okay. So this is basically saying, do I need to extend escrow? Once you pass your escrow date, you really have no contract. So whatever the escrow date is, according to escrow, whether it's 30 days, 45 days from the acceptance, once you pass that date, you technically don't have a contract anymore. So you need to have an extension. It's always better to get an extension up front than, oh my God, I can't close today. Can I have an extension? You're not going to close on time because there's a whole process of what it takes to close. You have to sign loan docs. You have to have your CD sent out before you sign loan docs. Then you have to fund, and so it's not going to be a surprise on the 25th. Oh my God, I'm not closing today. You had a process going, and if you're far down the process and you're not, working your timeline back, and I missed this mark, I need an extension, ask for it up front. It's a lot easier to work on extensions up front rather than last day. It's like, oh my God, I'm surprised I can't close escrow. Okay, same thing with contingencies. Do I need to increase my buyer investigation? Do I need to increase my loan? Do I need to increase other, insurability of property or review of solar contracts? Whatever it is, ask for a contingent, ask for an extension. And this way, everything's documented. It's not verbal. It's not all of a sudden, oh, I don't remember that conversation. Here's your notice to perform and we're canceling. So get everything in writing. And then buyer sign, seller sign, everyone agrees, and we move on. Market conditions, I'm not going to touch much on this. This is a pre-printed form that says, market conditions are what it is. Prices go up, prices go down, explains contingencies. These explanations are in about 15 other places. But again, this is something that needs to be done with every single transaction. Water conserving plumbing features, okay? Law in California that everything had to be low flow toilets, low flow water, to conserve water because we always have droughts. But again, the question is, are you aware? Okay, not that, it is or it isn't. This is basically just saying, carbon monoxide detector needs to be installed, and this is not even asking if you're aware. This is just saying these are things that need to be done. The SPQ and TDS ask questions. Do you have water conserving plumbing fixtures? Do you have your carbon monoxide detector? That's where it's a yes or no, I'm aware or not aware. This is just a disclosure. This is just saying, these are the things that need to be done. I'm not saying I have them. I'm not saying I don't have them. This is just a statement of this what needs to be done. Now we get into the fun stuff. Requests for repairs. This has been changed a little bit since we talked about FHA and VA. So, request for repairs is, I've done my inspections. Whether you have an inspection contingency or not, you could always ask for repairs. You may not be able to cancel if they say no, but you could always ask. And even if the seller says, I'm not doing any repairs, when I represent a buyer, I'm always going to ask because I'd rather have them say no. And surprisingly, depending on what the repair is, sometimes they say yes. So always do it to protect your buyer's interest. If your buyer says, you know what, I'd like to talk about these issues, let's talk about it. Again, it's numbered and you number them correctly. Date prepared, all it is whenever I was prepared, so I can, reference this document. And here's where we talk about it. So buyer requests the seller prior to final verification to take the other specified action of each item listed below or in the attached list dated. If you're going to do a list, do not do an addendum. An addendum has at the bottom, and we'll go over that, where they're agreeing to everything. You can just do a regular document list, just list everything in and just signatures. So it's not that they're agreeing to it, they're just acknowledging it. This is also a text overflow. So if I keep typing, a text overflow document's going to happen, and that will be the best way to handle this. But here you're going to list all the things that you've either found from your inspection, from your visual walkthroughs, whatever it is, things that the buyer would like remedied. Now, I always deal with systems and safety and soundness. Stained carpet, marks on wall, things like that, that's all cosmetic. I'm not going to ask for those things in a repair. I'm going to say, does the AC work? No, it doesn't work. Okay. AC needs to be working, in workable order, or needs to be serviced. So say what the issue is, identify it if you can from the, inspection report, item 2, page 10. What remedy do you like to have done? Don't just say, AC doesn't work. Okay, great. What happens? Say, you want it inspected, you want it repaired, you want it replaced, whatever you want to happen, please spell it out. So this way we know what we're talking about. And again, try to keep it to systems, safety, soundness, broken windows, the gas burner doesn't work, things like that. Water is leaking out of the bathtub, or water doesn't come out of the shower. Specific things and what the remedy is. Now, let's say we ask for all these things. Now we also have what's called section 1 of section 2, and this is from a termite report. If no termite report was done, then we don't care about anything. If a termite report was done and it's FHA, you're definitely going to want section 1, and you're going to attach the termite report. If it's a VA, you're definitely going to want section 1 and section 2. If it's conventional, depending on how much work was found, if it's, $100 worth of work, you may say, yeah, just leave it. I've got other things I want them to fix. Or it's like, hey, no, that $100 is going to make a big difference to me. I want that done. So this is, FHA, VA, required, conventional, discussion between you, the seller, and the buyer. Or let's say, this is so much work and all this that, I just want a credit. I just want X amount of dollars, and I'll take care of everything after this. Now, remember, and, it probably says it here too, that credits can only be applied towards closing and not closing costs. You can't go above closing costs. So if you have an excessive credit, talk to the lender, say, okay, what is my closing cost? So I know what I can go up to. And then if you have more than that, work out saying, you know what, I could do $5,000 in closing costs, but also I'd like a reduction in $5,000 because I have $10,000 worth of repairs. So make sure everything works out. If you put $10,000 here and you only have $8,000 in closing costs, your buyer is going to be very disappointed because they're only going to get $8,000. So they're going to come to you and say, hey, wait a minute. I said 10, they agreed to 10, what happened? Sorry, the lender's not going to allow it. So be upfront and figure it out up here before you move forward. Then attach any reports that substantiate any of the issues, termite report, home inspection report, anything, contract that was out there, whatever report you have to substantiate the issues to justify why you're asking for it or how much you're asking for. Now, this has been added recently. This is for FHA or VA buyers. If there are specific items that need to be fixed per the appraisal or the lender, they need to be identified here. If you put them up here, they're going to get lost in translation. If they are here, the seller knows that if I don't fix these things or address these things, you may not be able to get your loan, and you may be having out to cancel the deal. Okay, so that's why it's very important to specify them here so the seller knows these are definitely stuff that I need to look at. These are stuff, if I don't agree to it, you may move on, you may not move on, you may be happy. But this is something that we cannot avoid because this is something the lender is asking for. So this is something you need to put here. And then it says, if seller agrees to all buyer's requests, seller's part, so you have different ways to do. You could say, if we agree, you're going to remove your investigation of property, or you're going to remove everything except certain things. And you're also going to attach a contingency removal form. Okay. Expiration. This has never been there before. We now have a 3-day expiration. However, the seller does not need to respond to requests for repairs. If they don't respond, their answer is no, I'm not doing anything. But if they don't respond, I as an agent would still call them and just say, I just wanted to confirm you got my request for repairs. Because the question is, did they get it and they're not responding? Or did they not get it and you think they're not responding? So let me see what the chat is. What if the appraisal comes in after the inspection period? Okay, and that is why we require everything 17 days. If you looked at the beginning of the grid, it said FHA VA requirements 17 days. So you need to make sure that appraisal comes in before this. If not, you're going to need to get an extension of time like we talked about before, because there is contingency periods. After 17 days, if you removed your contingencies, we may, and again, this is a very, interesting point here. Request for repairs is not a contingency. The contingency is the inspection. So if you've released if you 17 days and you haven't done your request for repairs yet, the seller can give you a notice to perform because the contingency is the inspection. The contingency is not the request for repairs. We'd like to tie it together because we like to know what they're going to do for the request for repairs before we move the inspection contingency. So if you really want to do that, have it all up front as early as possible. Now, with the FHA and VA, even if it's past 17 days, if you can't get the loan because of it, you still have the loan contingency. So FHA and VAs handle a little bit differently. But my advice is to get your inspection and your appraisal done as quickly as possible. Fill it out, send out the request for repairs as early as possible. So you're in your 17 days to have the discussion going back and forth on what the resolution is. Any other questions on that? Let me see. I see one popped up. Okay. Oh, thanks. Okay. Okay. So, the buyer signs it. So now the seller has a few options. The seller could say, you know what? I agree with all your repairs. I'm checking this box. Let's move forward. Or the seller goes, you know what? I agree with most of it, but I don't agree with, and be very specific here, what you don't agree with. I agree with everything except I will not, have an AC repair guy come in, or I will not have a roof inspection, or I will not do this. Be very specific. Don't say, I don't agree with item number 2. Okay. Be very specific what item number 2 is. And then, maybe withdrawn by seller, blah, blah. But now, or the seller responds to buyer request. So the seller says, you know what? There's just too much stuff I don't agree with. I'm going to give you my own RRRR, which is the pirate's request for repairs. I'm going to give you my own, and let's see what you say about that. And or buyer's request not incorporated in agreement. Seller responds to buyer's request on the attached addendum to existing agreement. So again, they're giving you so many different ways to respond here. It's really confusing. The easiest is if you're not going to respond to something, 1 or 2 items over here, if you have a whole bunch of issues, do the RRRR, which we talk about next. You know, or seller does not agree at all, and I'm not even going to tell you what I want to do, and I'm done. You could always do another request for repairs number 2 and modify it, but the seller's not even going to give you anything back. Okay? Then the buyer says, you know what? Okay, I accept your partial agreement. Or, you know what? I don't accept the partial agreement, and buyer withdraws the request number 1 and makes a new request number 2. Or, you know what? I agree to everything and I'm happy and let's move forward. And now it says, you know, no, if the parties do not reach agreement, and this is again for FHA and VA, after completing repairs or other actions specified in 3A, you may already remove, you may no longer be eligible for an FHA loan. So this is what we talked about. So the seller needs to understand that if they don't agree to anything from the FHA appraisal or lender call outs, we may not have a loan and you may be canceling. And that's why we need to separate them on the request for repairs so the seller knows these are general requests. These are ones specific to the loan. And if I don't do these, I may be jeopardizing the deal. Now, let's say we move on and, you know, the seller goes, you know what? Yours was just too long, so I'm going to give my own. So this is the first one. So it'll be request repair number 1, and it's to your request for repair. But now requests for repairs are, they add up. They don't add up. Okay. So whatever is on the first one, if I said I'm not doing anything on the first one and I'm doing a second one, nothing on the first one counts anymore. Okay, so you got to do it all over again. So you could say, you know, to all buyers' requests except this, or at close of escrow, I'm going to give you X amount of money. You want a 5,000, I'm going to give you 10,000, or you didn't want any money, but I'm going to give you 5,000 just to settle all this, and I'm not going to do any of the repairs, or I'm going to lower the purchase price. So whatever the combination is. And then the seller conditions removes the, you know, if I agree to this, I got to remove my investigation contingency. And again, this has a 5 p.m., you know, 3-day right of after it's withdrawn. But again, request repairs are a little bit different and it never works that way. So basically the seller is saying, whatever you had on that repair, I have no idea. I didn't agree to anything. Or, you know, I'm saying I agree to everything except whatever. And I could have done that on the first one. So I don't know why I'm doing it here, but I could have. Or, you know, in this case, I'm saying, you know what? I understand all your issues, but I'm going to give you some money and take care of it. Now, be very careful because FHA may require some things to be done prior to the close of escrow. So even if you're getting a credit, the question is, who's going to be able to do the work and when are they going to be able to do the work? I, as a buyer, would never want, you know, I, as an agent, would never want my buyer to do any work on a property they don't own, just because there's too many liability issues and other issues that can happen. So even if I'm getting a credit, it still may not help with the FHA. So if you have an FHA or VA loan, be very careful how you work your request repairs and how you accept things. Now, let's say I don't like this. I could submit my own request for repair number 2. And again, I would have to start over and say exactly what I want. It's not like, well, you agreed to 3 things, but now I add in these 2. It all starts, it doesn't add on, you know, in sequence. Okay. So amendment and addendum. What's the difference? So amendment is once we have an agreement and we are changing something in the agreement. So it has to be 2 things. One, we have to have some sort of an agreement. And then we are changing something in the agreement. So let's say I, you know, want to change the purchase price. You know, hey, revised purchase price shall be this, or I'm asking for close of escrow shall be this. Okay, you could do an extension of time, or you could do an amendment here, or something else specific. You know, chandelier and bathroom is to be included with the deal. You know, originally it was excluded, so we're changing something. We're not adding anything, we're changing something in the original contract. We didn't have amendments a few years ago. Or we didn't have, yeah, all we had was addendums back then. Now we have an amendment which changes something, an addendum adds something. Okay? And again, you're doing whatever you asked for. Who's initiating this amendment? And again, it has a 3-day, you know, right to right to expire. And again, everyone has to agree. If everyone doesn't agree, the amendment is rejected and it doesn't become part of the contract. Everyone has to agree to this. Or we can do an addendum. Okay, so an addendum is we are now adding something to the contract. Okay, so let's say we never talked about, you know, the fountain outside, whether it was included or excluded. Okay, so now we're adding that. We're saying we want the fountain to be included in the contract. You know, if it was excluded in the original contract, then we need to do an amendment to change that. If it was never talked about, we can add it to it. So this is adding stuff. And when people use addendums to do like the request for repairs and all that, the problem is, it says here, the foregoing terms or conditions are hereby agreed to, and the undersigned acknowledge receipt of a copy of this addendum. So if I say, you know, seller to replace toilets, or, you know, seller to replace AC unit, and they sign here, are they signing it that they're agreeing to replace the AC unit? And this is where a lot of issues become, and sellers go, well, you know, I really don't want to sign this because I don't want to agree to this. So that's why it's better to use the text overflow and just let it take its course. Okay. Verification of property. Let me just do one quick thing. Hold on. Okay. So verification of property. This is to be done 5 days before we close escrow. And again, this is not a new inspection. This is just verifying, one, the property's in the same condition of when we purchased this. You know, the grass is as green as it was before. The pool is now not empty when it was full before. There's no holes in the walls, things like that. And also that all the repairs that I've asked for have been completed that I can tell. Okay, and you know, you could ask for receipts and anything else that needs to be done for the repairs. Unfortunately, we've had some buyers go, you know what, I don't want to do my verification until all the furniture's gone, because this way I have no idea what's underneath the rugs, behind the walls. It's a legitimate question, but usually the furniture's not going to be gone until they close escrow and they move out. So we need to do this 5 days before, definitely before we are signing loan docs. So if we do find anything critical, we have some recourse. If we find, you know, major holes in the wall, or one property that we just closed, the lemon tree was missing, and all of a sudden this lemon tree is very important to everybody. So if we would have found that early, we could say, you know what? We're not going to be signing loan docs until we can resolve the lemon tree. I want X amount of dollars, or I want the lemon tree put back. But once we close escrow, there's not much. You have no recourse at that point. So, you should still do it, but anything you find that may be an issue, you may not have a resolution to. So those are things you need to look at. And that's why, it's very important to work with the buyer, and the buyer really needs to do it, not you. You should be there, but it's not you doing it. And if the buyer can't do it for whatever reason, we're saying the buyer waives the right to conduct the final inspection. We had one deal where, due to, inclement weather and all that, the buyer wanted to do the walkthrough, but they couldn't. So we had it stated in here, the buyer's not waiving it, but unfortunately the buyer is unable to reach the property to do their visual inspection. And that's okay. But again, if they found stuff after, they'd still have no recourse, but at least it's not like, well, you waived the inspection, so now you really have no recourse. It's like, no, I couldn't get there. It's circumstances beyond my control. The roads were closed and I couldn't get up there. So, I still want to close on time because there was also a deadline that we needed to close in a certain period. So we wanted to close, but we didn't want to waive my right of the inspection. Because if I do find an issue and I go to court, the first thing the court's going to say, well, did you do your verification? And if I say, no, Judge, I waived it, then, your claim is a lot less. But if you say, Judge, I really wanted to, but unfortunately I was not able to get to the property to do my verification of property. So, I found this after we closed escrow. So again, it's all documentation in case we ever have an issue and we need to present our facts of why we did or didn't do something. So before I go with the last 3 documents, any questions on anything we've talked about the last few days? Come on, guys, I need some feedback here. Nothing. Everyone understands it all perfectly.
You're so good at your job, Fred.
All right, thank you. I wish I wasn't, because I'm so early now. I'm trying to get Kendall online because she's supposed to talk about NHD and her services, and she
So
wasn't.
I kind of have a question.
Yes, thank you.
So with the request for repairs, are you always, I guess I know you said it was like $100 or whatever for termite section 1. Forget the VA, FHA,
okay.
I understand that.
So the $100 is for the inspection.
Okay,
Then if they find any section 1 or section 2, they'll give you an estimate of what it would cost to fix that. So section 1, just so if anyone doesn't know, is there's actually active evidence of you have termite, infestation. There's something going on. Section 2 says something went on a while ago, you don't have it anymore, but you should correct it to prevent it from continuing. So that's why FHA requires section 1 to be done. VA requires section 1 and section 2.
but for conventional, is the seller always responsible for section 1, or that's always
No.
negotiable?
Conventional, it's really what the lender determines. If the section 1 work is so egregious that, the appraiser goes, oh my God, this house is falling down because of termites, the lender may not lend on it.
Right.
If the section 1 is very negligible, they're not going to know about it, and that's something to be negotiated between you and the seller. And that is why I don't put if it's not a VA or FHA loan, I don't put termite reports in the contract. If it is in the contract, the lender has the right to ask for it. If it's not in the contract and the buyer pays for it, the lender doesn't have the right to ask for it.
Okay, all right, thank
So,
you.
I've had a house where, we sold a house in Fillmore and the whole roof was eaten by termites. So, that was an obvious, the lender's not going to lend on it in that condition. But if it's just minor stuff and, the FHA appraiser is looking for things like that, a conventional appraiser is really not looking for those type of issues.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So here are the Oh, go ahead.
Fred.
Got a question?
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
I've got a microphone today.
I was gonna say, congratulations, you got a microphone.
I was on my desktop yesterday and it doesn't have a microphone. So, but in any case, yeah, I just wanted to follow up on, I'm new to the area. I was a realtor over the past 6 years in Oklahoma City. So
Okay.
we used an agent to buy the house that we're living in now. And I noticed when we were negotiating the price, or when we were getting our offer in or whatever, there was like when we initially got it in, he said, let's not get it in too quick. Our offer is going to get shopped around.
Right.
And then.
So do you know what that means?
Yeah. I definitely know what that means.
Okay.
But then it's like, and then once we did get our offer in, he kind of kept coming back to us and saying like, oh, well, the best offer is here now. It's here now. It's here now. It's here now. And I was just kind of like, that's kind of new to me. I've never, we didn't really do that, back in Oklahoma where I was working. And so I'm just kind of curious, what the best practice is there on that. I know it's a really crazy market around here. And so.
Right. So,
yeah.
So the best practice, well, there's multiple best practices.
Yeah.
So from the selling side, and we talked about this on day one and day two, is offers are not confidential unless the seller says, you know what, I don't want you to disclose any of their offers, or, and this is a new one, if the buyer fills out a confidential agreement.
Mhm.
So let's go with the normal, nothing's confidential, everything's open. So me as a listing agent, like you said, I'm going to get an offer. And if someone calls me and says, do you have any offers? Oh yeah, I have an offer. And, is it above or below asking? Oh no, this one's below asking. So now from the buyer side, I know I don't want to come in, below asking because you're not going to take that one. So I may come in closer to asking. If, you as the seller tell me, you know what, I have 5 offers, 3 of them are $10,000 over asking. Now from the buyer side, again, I go to my buyer and go, okay, they have 3 offers. They're over 10,000. Do you want me to submit an offer for you or not? I'm not going to submit a lowball offer because I know you have 3 over 10,000. So why would I come in under asking? So it helps in terms of limiting, looky-loos or, wasting my time. If I know, hey, it's 10,000 over, where do you want to be? Now, like you said on the first one, if you're the first offer in, I don't necessarily say I'm going to shop it around, but if people ask me, do I have any offers? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to tell you what my offer is. So I don't, be the first, be the last, be the middle. That's a tough one. There's no really right. I would always say write your best offer up front. Don't assume you're going to get counters. Just give your best offer up front, go with it. Now, another agent I've been talking to, and we had discussions on this, is she fills out what's called a confidential agreement, which is in car forms, that says, I'm submitting you this offer, but you can't disclose this offer to anybody. So they really can't shop your offer around.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
So they can't shop your offer around. They could just say, I do have an offer, but unfortunately I cannot disclose what that offer is.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Good to
know. I have a book of about 700 different forms out there. It's tough to know every single form, but when I was talking to this one agent, she told me about this. I go, oh, that's an interesting idea. I've never seen that before. And she goes, oh yeah, I do it on all my deals.
Okay.
So this way it keeps her information confidential. So she avoids the shopping around type of thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Very good.
Thank you.
So essentially that agent was doing, the normal stuff. It's like I said, it's normally, what we would do over there is it would just be just best offer. Just submit your best offer.
Right.
And
again,
it's kind of frowned upon if, I don't know, people just generally in that market, we're kind of don't like that. They don't like, don't tell me what the other offers are because I don't know if you're telling the truth kind of thing,
Right. Well,
yeah.
Again, I'm of the ethical persuasion. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna tell you I have an offer 20,000 if I don't have an offer over 20,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but again, like you say, some agents may not. So do they truly have 3 offers? Or
Yeah.
do they have 1 offer? And that's a shame for our industry that we really can't be upfront and honest about it. But there's
Yeah.
also some states that have non-disclosure states where you can't tell me what the offers are.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't know, in Oklahoma, what the rules are there, but I mean, some
Yeah.
states are like that. Like Utah, I think, is a non-disclosure state where
Yeah.
I can't discuss other offers.
Yeah, no, it's the same. It's the same as here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's essentially, but you have to ask for permission, basically. Like, so if the
Right.
seller says, go ahead, disclose, it's fine. As long as you have the permission, it's fine.
Okay, so here it's the reverse.
Mhm.
Here we don't ask for permission, but if the seller wants to take away the permission, they have to do it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, over there you
So-
have to ask
So
for
permission is assumed
Yeah.
unless the seller says no.
Ah, interesting. That is a change. That's different.
So
Okay.
that's the difference, and that's in the listing agreement where it says, offers are not confidential, blah, blah, blah. And if you want me to keep them confidential, you have to submit something in writing to say, no, what, I cannot disclose these offers.
Okay, I'm so glad I asked. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate you. Thank
Oh,
you.
good questions.
Yeah.
And also, it also depends on the environment. I mean, right now, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we were getting 10 offers. Now we're getting 3 offers. When we get down to 1 offer, are we going to still be asking, do you have any offers, or we're just going to submit, hey, hopefully we're the only offer going in.
Yeah, yeah.
So it all depends on the environment.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Fred.
Oh, no
Appreciate it.
problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is a issue that has come up, and we have lots of issues with it, is what happens when the seller says, you know what, I need to stay in the property X amount of days after we close escrow. Okay, whether it's because I'm moving out of town and my other property is not going to be ready, or I can't get a moving truck for 5 days, or whatever the reasons are, the seller's asking for time after we close escrow. So this opens up a whole can of issues. I mean, because right now we close escrow. So the question is, the seller is now a tenant or a person who's staying in the property. The buyer is now the owner of the property. Whose insurance is covering what? It just opens up a whole can of issues. And so what we've done is there are 2 types of forms. If the seller is going to stay less than 29 days after close of escrow, we are giving them a license to remain in possession. They're technically not a tenant. We don't want to give them that term tenant. We're giving them a license to stay in the property. Okay. So if it's 29 days or less, we're going to fill out this form. And even if it's 1 day, we still need to fill out this form, because this form covers a lot of issues that's going to happen, that could happen. And if we ever need to go to a court of law, we need to have this documented. So it basically says seller is granting a license to remain in possession of the property for X amount of calendar days, less than 29, or to a specific date. Now, the issue we have, and we've had a few deals, if you put a specific date in here, let's say they need 10 days. And if you put a specific date and escrow gets delayed for 3 days, now you don't have 10 days anymore. Now you have 7 days. So is it truly I need 10 days, or is it truly I need to stay until a specific date? Like we had one where they need to stay until there was a 3-day weekend. Okay. We didn't know how many days that was between whatever, but we needed to stay there until the 3-day weekend. So even if it was 2 days, we still needed a 3-day weekend so we could move over to 3-day weekend. So it depends on the scenario. If it's, a 10-day, 15 days, or a specific date, and then until 6 p.m. And then the question becomes is, do I do this because I'm a nice guy? Do I do this because I want my offer accepted and I'm not going to charge you anything? Or how do we want to work this? So you could say, I'm going to charge you, and it's usually PITI. So let's say 152, okay? But it's usually principal, taxes, interest, and insurance. And that's, or you can make up a dollar amount. It all depends what you want. So let's say I want to charge, if I know I said, hey, you know what, no matter what it is, I'm charging you $250 a day to stay, or I'm going to charge you PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance of your loan, of the buyer's loan. So this way the buyer's not coming out of pocket any money of what he needs to be spending. So that's something that's negotiated. And I've seen, depending on how long, I've seen it for free because you want your offer accepted. I've seen it, no, I really want the money, whatever the case is. And, at the close, all consideration we release to the buyer or held in escrow. So if it's, let's say you have $100 a day for 20 days, and let's say they move out earlier, then you get out, escrow would prorate whatever it is, split the difference between the buyer and the seller. So it's always better to keep it in escrow. So this way escrow has control of the money. And if it's not the full term, then the money's divvied out. If seller vacates the property prior to the end of the term, no portion of the consideration will be returned unless otherwise agreed in writing. And you're going to agree in writing that we're going to split the money, because if you only need 10 days, why should you pay for 20 days? Then the question becomes, if, there's a late check. This does not necessarily happen so much with 29 days because we're not going by a month. But when we do the lease, you'll see that this becomes an issue. Maintenance, who's going to take care of the pool, the spa, the grounds, the personal property, everything else, who's going to take care of this? Is it going to be the seller? Is it going to be the buyer? Delivery of possession, seller shall deliver the property in the condition and terms provided in the agreement. When is it? Is it going to be, within 5 days after delivery, buyer shall return the seller? So it lines out everything. Who's paying for the utilities? Seller agrees to pay for utilities except for these charges. So everything's laid out. There's nothing like that. When does the keys get turned over? That's a big one also. Does the buyer get the keys right away? Does the buyer get the keys when the seller moves out? A lot of people say, well, I own the property, why don't I have the keys? The seller goes, well, I'm still living here. I don't want someone else to have the keys so they can just walk in anytime. So it becomes an issue of when it's going to be turned over, and you guys negotiate that.
Doesn't it say in the new contract that when you close escrow, they get the keys and the combos and all of that?
That's in the contract, but now we have a seller extension. So because now the seller's staying extra.
Okay.
Yeah, the new contract, well, the RPA says that when we close escrow, we get all the keys at the time of recording. But now if we're staying extra, who gets the keys right away, or do we get the keys, after I turn over my possession?
Okay.
And again, seller cannot sublet the property, insurance. So the buyer's insurance is going to insure the home if, fire, damage, rain, whatever. But the contents of the home is not going to be insured by the buyer. So the seller needs to get what's called renter's insurance. And it's a very cost-effective thing. And you could have it for 2 days, 3 days, however long you're staying, just in case something happens and you lose the house and all the furniture or whatever. You're not going to be covered by the buyer's insurance because it's not the buyer's stuff in the house. It is now your stuff. So you would have to get what's called renter's insurance, just like you would do if you were renting a property or a condo or anything like that, to protect your stuff inside the location. So it's like called a walls in insurance policy. And this waiver shall not be constructed as continuing. So again, this is a license. We are giving you a license to stay less than 29 days. I always have issues anytime the seller's staying more than 1 day, but this has been used a lot. The problem now comes when we need to increase that. So anything over 29 days, you now have a lease. And a lease is 7 pages as opposed to 1 page. Now you have a tenant and you are now a landlord. And as we know in today's environment, that has all different issues of, trying to get tenants out, even with leases, without leases, it just becomes an issue. The other issue is, so, the landlord rents to the tenant, who it is, the premises, the address. The other issue is to have a lease, we need a specific date. We can't leave it open-ended that says, 32 days from close of escrow. So we had a deal where this became, and we have it right now, a really big issue. In the counter offers, it said, rent back for 59 days. When they did the lease, we put the date for 59 days here. Unfortunately, escrow didn't close on time. So escrow now got extended. But what does that do? That means our 59 days got shortened. So then we had to go back to the buyer and go, do you really need 59 days? Can you deal with 50 days? Can you deal with, 45 days? Because the seller doesn't have to agree to a new one and the buyer doesn't have to agree to a new one. So the problem is now we have this in stone, so we have to figure out how to make it work. So the first scenario was, okay, if you want anything past the date that we put in here, it's going to cost you $125 a day because I got to pay another month of rent where I'm at and all that. And the buyer's going, no, I don't want to do that. But unfortunately, the agreement is the agreement. So we worked with the buyer and the buyer said, okay, fine, I can move within that time frame to get it done. But that's the big difference. One of the differences between seller in possession and a lease. A lease has a specific ending date. A seller in possession has a specific number of days. So whenever escrow closes, we have those number of days. So I would never do a specific date in a seller in possession because it does create issues. But this goes into a full-blown lease. Who's responsible for escrow payments? Who's responsible for rent? When's it going to be paid? How's it going to be paid? Is there a security deposit? Is there a late charge for checks? If we're talking about 30 plus days, we're talking about at least 1 month payment, if not 2. Now, the other thing is, it's very important to understand, if your buyer has a loan, that lender may not allow you to stay past 59 days. Because after 59 days, the lender is now saying, well, wait a minute. Is this going to be a lease? Is this going to be a rental? Are you ever going to move in there? So you got to talk to your lender too, if the seller truly needs more than 59 days. If they truly do need more than 59 days and your lender says, no, sorry, 59 is a hard cutoff, you may look at moving your escrow date and, closing a little bit later. But then again, the longer you don't close, the more issues that can happen, the higher risk that, things can happen and blow up the deal. So it is a balancing act. So, that's why I always say, close of escrow, get out. Anything else becomes issues. And like I say, it is 7 pages. It is a true lease. Is there parking? Is there storage? Who's paying utilities? Condition of the premises, maintenance. You are becoming a landlord. The seller is becoming a tenant, and all the rules of tenant landlord goes hand in hand. If the tenant doesn't move out in time, do you have to do an eviction? What are the processes? It could be very sticky, could be very nasty. So try to stay away from anything over 30 days. That's just my advice. But it is a full-blown lease that you'd go through the whole thing. And then again, you also have all the disclosures related to that. Bed bug disclosure. So it's basically you are a landlord. They are now the tenant. This is what needs to be disclosed. Okay? And now we're going to go into the fire hardening defensible space addendum. So basically this is if so the first part, let's go over the requirements. First, you have to have a TDS. If no TDS is required, don't even think about this. If a TDS is required, then the next question becomes, is this a high or very high fire zone? And we find out from our NHD report. That is where we would determine if it's in a high or very high fire zone to see if this is required. So if there's a TDS and it's high and very high, we need it. If there's no TDS, we don't. If there's a TDS and it's not a high or very high fire zone, we don't need it. So now we need this. So now the top part has another disclosure. So the top part says, was the property built before 2010? Okay, so if the property was built before January 1st, 2010, we need to fill out the fire hardening part. So the fire hardening part is going to ask questions about the property, to make sure that anything built after 2010, the building code includes all these new preventive measures to make sure that if there's a fire around you and there's ambers that come into your property, your house is not going to go on fire. The eaves are going to be sealed. The vents in the attic is going to have a certain size. There are certain measures that were taken to prevent fires from ambers creating fires in your house. So again, it's going to ask you questions. And again, the questions are you aware? Is the seller aware of these issues? Is the seller aware of eaves or soffits or roof ventilation that have opens in excess of 1/8? I held a house for 23 years. I don't know. I'm not going to go up there and measure if this was 1/8 or not. So I'm not going to check it because I'm not aware. I don't have any I don't have any requirement to go do my due diligence to measure it or not. If I knew, oh yeah, I just replaced those grates, they're within 1/8 and perfect, we're great, then I'm aware. If I'm not aware, I'm not aware. Roof coverings made of untreated wood, shingles, or shakes. That one you might be aware of. You might know what your roof is made out of. Combustible landscaping or other materials within 5 feet of the home, or under the footprint of an attached deck. Am I aware of this? Do I have single pane or non-tempered glass windows? Am I aware? So most of them, people don't check anything because they're not aware of it. And we're going to modify this because the question becomes, do they not check it because they're not aware of it? Or do they not check it because they just don't want to answer? So we're going to go with, future versions will probably be something more like the SPQ or TDS, where you have a yes or no. Yes, I'm aware. No, I'm not aware. So this way we know they at least looked at it and checked the right box. Okay. Now, defensible space is the space around your house up to 100 feet or the property line, whichever is less. We have found that when there are wildfires miles away from your house, ambers will, depending on the wind conditions, ambers can go miles. So if an amber falls in your backyard and you have combustible material, you may have a secondary fire pop up in your backyard. So what this is why it's called defensible space. So I'm defending my space from my house 100 feet out or the property lines, whichever is less. Most people don't have 100 feet. Most people just go to the property lines. If there's something on the other side that's responsible for the HOA, that's the HOA issue, not your issue. You're up to your property line. Okay. So again, what do we do? So and no area that we know of in Southern California has what's called a local ordinance. So we're all under CAL FIRE, the state ordinance. If there were specific local ordinances that said, oh, this and this and this, we would have to follow that. But we have no local ordinance, so we have two choices. We have no local ordinance, and we never had an inspection done. No one ever came out. CAL FIRE never came out. They never gave us a report. We have nothing. So we're saying we have nothing. So you as the buyer now are accepting the responsibility that within 1 year of the close of escrow, you are going to have an inspection done and you will take whatever actions is required to remedy the issues. So CAL FIRE is going to come out. They're going to do an inspection. They're going to tell you, wait a minute, this is a combustible palm tree. We need to remove it. Or nope, everything is clear. You're fine. Whatever it is, the buyer is now taking that responsibility. The other issue is, yes, there's no local ordinance, but in the last 6 months, we had someone come out from CAL FIRE and do an inspection for us. So here's a report. Do what you like with it now. Doesn't mean I did everything, I'm not saying I remedied anything, but I'm now providing you the report. And if there's stuff that needs to be remedied, you can ask for it in the request for repairs. And you have 7 days once I give you this acceptance to do that. So those are the two choices. Oh my God, we froze, but you know what? We're lucky. We are at a point where we are over. So I'm going to wait a while to see if it comes back. I still don't know what's going on with my computer. But what it is now the buy, if we pick number one, B1, and we don't check anything, the buyer takes on that responsibility. So the question is, if the buyer says, no, I don't want to sign this, you can cancel the deal because the buyer has to agree to this. Otherwise, we don't have a deal. The buyer cannot do this inspection because it is a federal inspection and buyers cannot do federal inspections. Only the seller can do a federal inspection. So the question becomes, if they don't sign it, what happens? The buyer could say, you know what, I'm not signing it. The seller could say, well, if you're not signing it, we're canceling the deal. We cannot move forward. Some resolution has to be made